Okay, good morning my dear students. Again I'm going to take your history class, and the topic we are going to do today is the protest movement. So the previous chapter which we did was Cold War. So I finished with this chapter. Just one topic is left which I'll be giving you today. Okay, I'll be sending just one topic, small topic, that note I'll be sending you today. And from again today we'll be doing this protest movement, and the topics which we are going to do under this chapter, the protest movement, is civil rights movement, anti-apartheid movement, and the feminist movement. So these are the three topics which we'll be doing in this chapter. That is civil rights movement, anti-apartheid movement, and the feminist movement. And now the first topic which we'll be doing from this chapter is the racial problem. Okay, so the racial problems and the civil rights in USA. Okay, so if you have your books, please look into your books, or else just pay attention. After the Second World War, the United States of America emerged as the great power in world politics. So after the end of the Second World War, so we already did Second World War. So then after the end of the Second World War, now United States, USA, it emerged as the great power all over the world. Because of United States, the Allied powers, they won this Second World War. So United States, it emerged as the great power. And in spite of the general affluence means let's say the power, the wealth, okay, which USA had, there were a number of problems in America. So in spite of America being a wealthy country, but still it had a lot of problems. Like one of the important issue was the racial discrimination in the country. So in America also there were racial discrimination. Slavery was abolished in America in 1863. So slavery, it was already abolished in 1863. So in 1863, the slavery was already abolished. But the black people residing in America for a long time expected that they would be entitled to enjoy the same rights as the whites enjoyed, like the right to own land. And when the slavery was totally abolished, then what the black people thought? The white people, they were discriminating the blacks in America. So when the slavery was abolished, so the black people, they thought that they would be getting equal rights, like they would enjoy the same rights as the whites, and they will also have the right to own land. Now they will also have the right to get good education, okay, and also the right to vote. Clear? So this is what the blacks thought. So they'll get the same right as the white. Okay, the right to vote, the right to get proper education like the blacks, and also the right to vote. In South, now towards the southern America, southern states of America, South America, southern states of America, slavery, it existed for over 200 years. So in South America, slavery, it existed for almost 200 years. Then the white people residing in southern states always took the black people as slaves and inferior. So the white people in South America, they took the blacks as their slaves, and they were very inferior, took them as inferior compared to the whites. And naturally these people felt it difficult to treat them as equal. So the whites could not treat the black people in South America as equal. Then very soon the black people, they felt that they were discriminated against in all respects. So what the black people thought? They thought that they were discriminated in South, okay, in South America they were discriminated in all aspects of their life, everywhere. So see, they were prevented from voting. First, they were not allowed to vote. Okay, so they were prevented from voting. They were forced to attend separate schools for poor quality of education than that enjoyed by the whites. So they were forced to attend separate schools. Okay, they were separate schools. And the education which they got compared to the whites were very, very poor quality education. Okay, and they were segregated. Segregated means they were separated in places like restaurants, buses and trains. So everywhere, buses, train, restaurant, everywhere they were separated. Okay, they had different, in restaurant also, different restaurant for the blacks and different for the whites. Buses also it was different. Okay, or they had to take the back seat in the bus, and trains. So everywhere they were segregated, that is they were separated. They had to do the most unpleasant and ill-paid jobs. So unpleasant, ill-paid jobs all were done by the blacks. Not only that, most of the trade unions which meant to protect the interest of the workers refused to allow black people to join as members. Now, most of the trade union, this trade union was actually meant to protect the interest of the workers. Now this trade union also, they refused to allow black people to be the member of this trade union. So this trade union, which was supposed to protect the interest of the people, so this trade union also did not allow the blacks to be the member of this trade union. So the first organized attempt, okay, now the first attempt was made by this organization, and it says here the first attempt to campaign for the black rights began in 1910 with the formation of the National Association. Now in 1910 an association was formed, so which was known as NAACP. NAACP. So what is the full form of NAACP? Is National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Okay, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. So this colored people means not only they were Asians also, okay, they were black people, they were Asians, okay. So this association was for the advancement of all the colored people. But this organization, it failed to make any headway. That means it did not make any, this association did not make any progress. And the black people were still treated as second-class citizens during the Second World War. Okay, so the blacks, this association also did not help much. Still the blacks were treated as second-class people. Okay, clear with this? So what was the problem? The racial problem which was faced in America, especially southern states of America. Okay, clear? Now I move on to the next topic. So the next topic we are going to do is the changed attitude of the government. Changed attitude of the government, US government. So now what happened? The US government changed his attitude, or let's say the US government changed the attitude towards the blacks. In 1946, please remember this date, in 1946, President Truman, who was the president of US at that time? It was President Truman, appointed a committee to investigate civil rights. So he appointed a committee, and this committee, their job was to investigate on civil rights. The committee recommended that the Congress should pass law to stop racial discrimination in jobs and to allow the blacks the right to vote. So President Truman in 1946, he appointed a committee, and the job of this committee was to investigate the civil rights. Okay, and this committee suggested the Congress to pass a law so that the racial discrimination would be stopped in jobs and also allow the black the right to vote. Okay, so they should be, so President Truman in 1946, he came up with a committee, and this committee started to investigate the civil rights. And again the Congress passed a law where equality of jobs should be given to the blacks and also the right to vote. The committee itself gave several reasons for its recommendations. So these were the recommendations of this Truman Committee. Some politicians felt that it was not morally right to treat the blacks in this way. So some of the politicians, they thought that this was not the right way to treat the blacks. Second, it was a waste of talent to exclude the blacks from top jobs. So some of the blacks were so talented that they could be put to the higher post or top jobs, but they were not given this job. So it was the talent. So what happened to the talent of the blacks? It was wasted. The blacks gradually became outspoken in the demand for civil rights. So the blacks, they started speaking for their demands. Slowly, they started to voice out. They started to speak out for their equality, for the demands. America could not claim that the country is really a democratic country, as 10% of the population was denied voting rights. So America could not claim itself as a democratic country because 10% of these black people were still denied voting rights. And nationalism had gradually developed in Asia and Africa. Nationalism, now slowly this country, so slowly like India, okay, Ghana, Kenya, they were getting their independence. So Asian countries and African countries, okay, now nationalism, they were fighting for their independence. They were on the verge of getting their independence. The non-white people of India and Indonesia were on the verge of getting independence. These new states might turn against America and move towards communism if American whites continued this unfair treatment towards the black people. So most of the countries, now they were fighting for their independence and they were on the verge of getting their independence. So what America feared was that, again, these people, these blacks also, now they might turn towards communism and, okay, they might again revolt against America. Clear? They might again fight against the Americans and because of their unfair treatment towards the black. Okay, so because of all these reasons, the government changed its attitude towards the blacks. As a result, what happened? Within few years, the government and the Supreme Court declared new laws to introduce racial equality in the country. So the government, the US government and the Supreme Court, they got together and they made new laws so that there would be equality between the blacks and the whites. So separate schools for the blacks and the whites were declared illegal and some black had to be included on all juries. Juries are a group of judges who takes a certain decision. So now the government and the Supreme Court, they got together and they made a new law for equality. So the first is there should be no separation of schools. The whites and the blacks could go to the same schools and some of the black people should also be included in the jury, that is in a decision making group. Okay. Then schools should be desegregated. It meant the black and the white children, they could attend the same school. In 1950, again, there were so many civil rights acts passed. So here you have to remember the dates. So there were so many civil rights acts passed. The 1957 Civil Rights 1957 Civil Rights Act thus set up a commission to investigate the denial of voting rights to the black people. So this act, 1957 Act, it started to investigate, okay, on why the voting rights, okay, were denied. It started to investigate on the denial of voting rights to the black people. Again, in 1960, another Civil Rights Act was passed, and this act, it had provisions for the black to register as voters. Now, this right was to investigate the denial of voting rights, this 1960 Act to register the black to vote. Okay, register the blacks as voters. But it was not very effective. This was not very effective. Why? Because the blacks were afraid of registering themselves as voters for fear of being harassed by the whites. So they thought that if they registered as voters, then what will happen? They will be harassed by the whites. Okay, so the government, the Supreme Court and the government came up with this civil right to investigate, okay, why there was denial of voting rights. And Act of 1960, Civil Rights Act of 1960, it registered the blacks as voters, but the blacks did not want to register themselves as voters because they feared that they might be harassed by the whites. But unfortunately, the laws were not always carried out. Some of the southern states refused to implement the school desegregation order. So some of the white, again the laws were not carried out even though it was passed by the government and the Supreme Court, because some of the whites, they did not wanted to send their children to the schools where the blacks were, because they treated the blacks as their servants, their slaves, isn't it? So they did not want to put their children to that school where the blacks were going. So ultimately President Eisenhower sent federal troops to escort the black children into high school at Little Rock, Arkansas, where the governor had defied the law, the order of the Supreme Court. So what did the President Eisenhower had to do? He sent federal troops to escort these black children into the high school at Little Rock, Arkansas. So the federal troops were sent along with the children to escort them to the schools. This was a symbolic victory. So this was a symbolic victory. But the southern whites, they continued to defiance, to disobey the law. Again in 1961, only 25% of schools and colleges in South were desegregated. Okay, not 100%, but just 25% of the schools were desegregated. That desegregated means there were no separation. Okay, the whites and the blacks, they went to the same school, but only 25% schools were desegregated. Are you clear? Then the campaign for equal rights. Okay, the next topic is the campaign for equal rights. First we did the civil rights movement in USA. Okay. Second is the attitude of the the attitude of the US government towards the black, and the campaign for equal rights. In the mid-1950s, a mass civil rights movement developed in America for a number of reasons. So a mass civil rights movement, now people, the blacks, they wanted their rights, they were fighting for their rights, and a mass civil rights movement started in USA. And these were the reasons. A huge number of black people lived in northern industrial cities. They became aware of the political issues, and in the meantime, the middle class had emerged in America. They produced a number of talented leaders. Now what happened? There were a huge number of black people who lived in northern industrial cities. They were living in town cities, industrial, very developed, okay, industrial cities. And now they became aware of what was happening, okay, what was happening in America. Okay, how the blacks were treated, what was happening. They came to know about this racial problem. And in the meantime, there were a lot of black middle class people, and now they emerged as a talented leaders. Okay, one of the leader was Martin Luther King. In Asia and Africa, states like India and Ghana became independent. Inspired by these developments, the black Americans protested against the unfair treatment of the white people. So in Asia and Africa, what happened? Asian countries, African countries, they started getting their independence, like India, Ghana, Kenya, they got their independence. And inspired by this development, the blacks in America also, they started to protest. They thought that if we also protest like the Indians and the people of Ghana, then we will also get equal rights. We will also get our rights, okay, from the whites. The Truman Committee had raised the hopes of the black people, but they became impatient at the slow pace and the small amount of change in the society. So Truman Doctrine, the Truman Committee of 1947. Okay, we already did this. So the Truman Committee, it gave hope to the blacks. But the people, the blacks, were not happy because the pace was very, very slow. It did not do much. The small advances they made created strong hostility among the southern whites. So this advances, because they just made here and there are few advances. Okay, so the small advances they made created strong hostility among the southern whites. So the southern whites, the people of South America, the whites of South America, they were not happy at all with this kind of Truman Committee, because they did not want to give the equal status, equal rights to the blacks. Some southern state government even banned the NAACP, that is National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. So this was the first organization which fought for the rights of the colored people, that is black and the Asians. Okay, so some of this government, some of the state government, some of the government of South America, they were not happy with this organization NAACP, and they wanted to ban this NAACP. It was now felt that a national mass movement should be started to change the situation. So what was felt? That a mass movement, okay, should be started in order to change the situation. Okay, if you want to change the situation, if you want equal rights, then what is needed? A mass movement is needed. Okay, clear till here? So today we did these 3 topics, which is the racial problem and the civil rights in USA, where we did about how in USA after the Second World War, though America emerged as the greatest power in the world, but still it had some problems. So what was the problem? The racial discrimination. Especially, even though the slavery was abolished, now the blacks thought that they would be getting equal rights as the whites. But in South America, this slavery, or let's say discrimination, still existed. Okay, so like they were prevented from voting, the children were not allowed to go to the same schools, there was segregation, there was separation in restaurants, buses, trains, and they had to do the unpleasant job. And also the trade union, which was meant to protect the interest of the people, they were not allowed to be the member of this trade union. Okay, so an organization was started, NAACP, that is National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. This was actually to safeguard the colored people, the blacks and the Asians, but this also, it could not do much. Still in South America, the people were discriminated. So again, President Truman in 1946, he came up with a committee, okay, to investigate civil rights. Then, according to this civil right, equality should be given to the blacks in jobs and they should also get the right to vote. Okay, because there were reasons for this, because some of the politicians, they thought that it was not good to treat the blacks this way. The talent of the blacks were wasted. The blacks started to demand, they came up with a demand, they started to speak out, okay, and demand for their equal rights. And America could not be, if the voting right is denied to the blacks, America could not be called as a democratic country. And lastly, nationalism, okay, it started to develop in Asia and Africa, and countries like India, Ghana, they were on the verge of getting their independence. Okay, and America also thought that if they do not treat the blacks equally, then America also might move towards communism. Okay, so the Supreme Court and the government, they both came together with a new law. So what was the new law? To give equality to the blacks. So there should be no desegregation of schools. The students and let's say the blacks and the white, they should be sent to the same school. Okay, the blacks should also be included in all the juries, in all decision making. Okay, then in 1957 a Civil Rights Act was passed to investigate why voting rights were denied to the black. In 1960 again another Civil Rights Act was passed to register the blacks as voters. But this did not make progress. Why? Because the blacks, they feared to register themselves as voters because they thought that they would be harassed by the whites. Again, the law was not carried out in South America because they did not want it desegregation of schools, because they did not want it to send their children to the same schools where the blacks were studying. But still, President Eisenhower sent federal troops and the students were escorted, the black children were escorted to the high school at Little Rock. Okay? Understood? So, though it was a symbolic victory, but just what happened? The laws were not always carried out in South Africa, so only 25% of the schools were desegregated. And lastly, the campaign for equal rights. So the mass civil rights movement started to develop in America. So there were three reasons. First is there were a number of black people who lived in industrial cities, northern industrial cities, and they knew what was happening in America, the racial problem. And there were a lot of middle class educated people, and they turned out to be good leaders. In Asia and Africa, countries like India, Ghana, Kenya, they got their independence. And now people got inspired. The blacks in America, they got inspired and they also wanted to protest against the whites. And lastly, the Truman Committee, it raised the hopes of the people, but the pace was very, very slow. It did not make much progress. And the southern states also, the South American states, the government, the South American government wanted to ban the NAACP, this organization which was to protect the rights of the colored people, the blacks and the Asians. Okay, so now what the people thought in South America, they thought that a mass civil rights movement was needed, okay, to change the situation in America, to get equality in America. Okay, so I'll stop here and I'll be giving you notes maybe tomorrow or day after. So please go through whatever we have done, okay, and I'll be sending you notes. And today I'll send you notes on that last topic, which is left.